Figure out yourself. That is what my wife Stephanie screamed as she slammed her foot on the gas and sped away, leaving me stranded in the parking lot of a gas station in Billings, Montana, 200 miles from home in Denver. Her sisters, Jessica and Vanessa, were in the back seat, laughing hysterically like it was the funniest joke they had ever pulled. My name is John, I am 34, and I work construction for North Peak Engineering. I had been married to Stephanie for 8 years, and what was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway for her cousin's wedding had turned into something I never could have imagined. We had driven up in her sedan, the four of us sharing gas money and hotel expenses, and from the very start of the trip something felt off. Stephanie kept exchanging these sneaky little looks with her sisters in the rearview mirror, and there were whispered conversations in the back seat, whenever they thought I was not listening. When I asked what was going on, she just gave me that practice smile and said, "Nothing, babe, just sister stuff." But my gut told me otherwise. An hour outside Billings, we pulled into a gas station. I went inside to grab coffee and use the restroom, and when I came back out, they were already in the car, engine running. Stephanie rolled the window down with a strange grin plastered across her face. "Get in the car, Stephanie," I said firmly as I walked toward the passenger door, but she shook her head and said, "Actually, we have been talking, and we think you need to learn some independence." Confused, I asked what she meant, and Jessica leaned forward, smirking, saying, "You're always so clingy, John," following Stephanie around like a lost puppy. "We thought this would be good for you." Vanessa added with a laugh, "A little adventure." I looked down at the keys in my hand, realizing with a sinking heart that they were only our house keys, not car keys. My truck was back in Denver, parked safely in our driveway. "This is not funny," I said, trying to hold my voice steady. "Whatever joke this is, cut it out." Stephanie just smiled wider and said, "It is not a joke, it is a prank. You are always so serious, John. Learn to laugh a little." Then, with one final yell of "Figure out yourself," she floored the accelerator, and I watched as the car and her tail lights disappeared down Highway 2, leaving me standing there in the growing chill of October. The wind bit through my jacket, carrying the faint metallic smell of snow in the air. My heart raced as I pulled out my phone, calling Stephanie's number, straight to voicemail. I tried Jessica, but her phone sent me to voicemail too. Vanessa had blocked me months ago after some pointless argument I could barely remember. That was when it hit me. This was no prank that would end in an hour with apologies and nervous laughter. No, this was deliberate, calculated, and cruel. This was them showing me exactly what I meant to them. Nothing. I went back inside the gas station, my chest tight with anger and disbelief, and asked the clerk about a bus ticket to Denver. He shook his head and said no buses stopped here, but Greyhound ran out of Billings 40 miles east. 40 miles that I had no way to reach except by taxi. As I stood there with my wallet and phone, I thought back to how I met Stephanie 9 years ago. She was working as an environmental consultant at a job site where my crew was stationed. She had this spark about her, the kind of woman who made you feel like you were the only one in the room when she looked at you. I fell fast and hard. But her sisters had been a different story from the very beginning. Jessica, 2 years older, always had sharp opinions and never hid her dislike for me. Vanessa, the youngest, full of attitude and uncertainty, had a way of making me feel like I was stealing her sister away. From family dinners filled with inside jokes I did not get, to vacations where they planned activities without me, I was always the outsider. Stephanie told me they were just protective, that they would warm up to me, but they never did. In fact, it only worsened after marriage. Jessica openly said I was holding Stephanie back from adventures, while Vanessa rolled her eyes at every offer I made to help. Even worse, Stephanie herself had grown distant, constantly glued to her phone texting her sisters, rearranging our plans for them, and even forgetting milestones in our marriage. She forgot our anniversary 1 year because she was helping Vanessa move. She missed my birthday another year because Jessica had a relationship problem. Every time she excused it with, "Family comes first," and I had always agreed, but standing there in that cold Montana air, I realized I was never truly considered family. The warning signs were there even on this trip. The insistence I leave my truck at home, the hotel booked only under her name, the jokes about how I had stopped being spontaneous. Vanessa's words from the back seat echoed in my head. Remember when you used to be fun? I had laughed it off, but the truth was, it stung deeply. I was working 60-hour weeks, making sure we were comfortable, fixing things around the house, remembering dates, planning everything I thought a good husband should. Yet none of it mattered. Watching the sunset over the Montana hills from that gas station, I realized I had been married to someone I did not truly know. The clerk let me use a landline to call a taxi. $60 I could hardly afford, but I had no other choice. I caught the Greyhound bus in Billings, a 14-hour ride back to Denver with nothing to do but think. I kept checking my phone, waiting for an apology, waiting for a panic call that never came. And somewhere outside Casper, Wyoming, around midnight, the truth hit me. It was never about independence. It was about humiliation. It was about putting me in my place in their twisted version of loyalty and sisterhood. I imagined them sitting in Jessica's apartment, planning this for weeks, laughing about how clueless I was, and that thought hurt more than being left behind. When the bus pulled into Denver at 8 in the morning, I had already made my decision. Taking a cab home, I half expected to see Stephanie's car in the driveway, but the house was empty. I sat at the kitchen table, called in sick to work, and then for the first time, I did something I had never allowed myself to do. I went through her things. Her laptop was locked, but she had left browser tabs open. I found chat threads with her sisters going back months. There were screenshots of my texts shared with mocking commentary, laughing emojis, and even photos of me sleeping captioned with things like dead to the world as usual and zero awareness. But what broke me completely was the thread about Montana. Jessica had typed, "We should totally ditch him somewhere and see how long it takes him to figure out how to get home." Vanessa had replied, "OMG, yes. He is so dependent on Steph for everything." And then Stephanie, my wife, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved for nearly a decade, had written, "You guys are terrible, but also it would be hilarious." They had planned it. Every cruel, humiliating detail. The gas station stop, the story about needing independence, even the backup plan. It had all been carefully laid out, and when I read the last part of the group chat where Jessica wrote that if I somehow made it home before them, I would probably just call my mom or something, followed by her labeling me a big baby, I felt something inside me go cold. I closed the laptop slowly, the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest until I could hardly breathe, and I just sat there for a long time in silence, staring at the walls of the house that suddenly felt like a stranger's place. Eventually, I stood, went upstairs, packed a single bag, and walked out without leaving a note, without turning off the utilities, and without even locking the door. It was the same way they had driven away from me, except this time the difference was that I knew I was not coming back. I drove straight to my brother Kevin's apartment in Colorado Springs. Kevin worked nights at a manufacturing plant and had a spare room. When I showed up at his door with only a duffel bag and no explanation, he looked at me for a long second, then just nodded, handed me a beer, and asked how long I planned on staying. "Don't know yet," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Kevin had never liked Stephanie, and although he had never admitted it outright, I had always sensed in the way he got quiet when she was around, the way he excused himself early from family gatherings whenever she attended. That night, I told him everything, the so-called prank, the months of planning, the group chats mocking me behind my back, every detail. When I finished, he just shook his head and muttered, "Jesus, John, you're better off without her." His words stung but rang true. By Monday morning, I called my supervisor at North Peak and requested a transfer to a project in Colorado Springs. They were shorthanded on a hospital renovation project and needed experienced hands. So my boss agreed immediately, asking no questions, only telling me to report on Wednesday. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of relief, as though a door I had been afraid to open was suddenly pushed wide. But the calm did not last long. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Stephanie had returned home. Her voice on the voicemail was tense but controlled. "John, where are you? I came home, and you're just gone. That's not like you. Call me back. We need to talk about this." There was no apology, no hint of accountability, just bewilderment that I had dared to disappear. I blocked her number. An hour later, Jessica tried calling, then Vanessa, and when I blocked them too, new numbers started popping up. Stephanie's work phone, numbers I didn't recognize, all carrying the same message. I was overreacting. It was just a harmless joke. I needed to come home so we could fix things. By Thursday, Kevin came back from his night shift with an uneasy expression and said, "Your wife's here. She's sitting in her car outside." I looked out the window and saw her sedan parked across the street. When she noticed me, she stepped out, walking quickly toward the building, her face rehearsed in a mask of concern. I met her in the lobby before she could knock on Kevin's door. "John, thank God," she said, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "What do you want, Stephanie?" I asked flatly. "I want you to come home. I want us to talk about this like adults," she said, her voice laced with urgency. "Talk about what?" I asked, my anger breaking through. "How you abandoned me 200 miles from home. How you and your sisters plotted it for months." Her face shifted then. The mask slipped, and for just a moment I saw irritation flash through, as though I were being unreasonable. "It was a prank, John. You're acting like we committed a crime," she said sharply. "You left me stranded. I shot back. You laughed about it. You planned it for months." Her voice grew colder, more defensive. "Because you needed it. You're so dependent, so clingy. We thought if you had to figure something out on your own for once, maybe you'd finally grow up a little." The humming of the fluorescent lights filled the silence as I looked at the woman I had shared 8 years of marriage with and realized with sudden clarity that I did not know her at all. "I'm not coming home," I said firmly. She tried to laugh it off, shaking her head. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just vanish because your feelings got hurt." "Watch me," I replied, and I turned, walking toward the elevator. She followed, her voice rising, promises and threats spilling out one after another. But I stopped listening. When the elevator doors closed, she was still talking, her voice cut off by the metal doors sliding shut. By Friday morning, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Jessica. Stephanie's really upset. You need to fix this." I showed Kevin, who simply shook his head and said, "Change your number." So I did. 3 weeks later, I was settling into my new life. I worked long days on the hospital site, spent weekends helping Kevin fix his truck, and learned, maybe for the first time in my adult life, what it felt like to make decisions without checking with someone else. I rented a small apartment on the south side of Colorado Springs. Nothing special but mine alone. I chose the furniture, the paint, the shows I wanted to watch, and the meals I wanted to eat. And for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. No apologies, no compromises, no silent battles. Then my mother called. "John, honey." Stephanie came by the house, she said softly. I had been avoiding telling my parents, not ready to explain the separation. But apparently, Stephanie had wasted no time. "What did she tell you?" I asked. My mother hesitated. She said, "You're having some kind of breakdown, that you disappeared after a family trip and won't answer calls." I could hear the worry in her voice, the same motherly concern that had always seen Stephanie as the stable, responsible partner in our marriage. "It's not a breakdown, Mom," I said quietly. "We're having problems." "What kind of problems can be worked out?" she pressed. I didn't want to go into the cruel details, the group chats, the staged humiliation, the months of being the punchline of their jokes. To explain it would sound petty, unbelievable even, as though I were blowing a harmless prank out of proportion. "I'll call you later, Mom. I need to think," I said, and when I hung up, the realization sank in deeper. Stephanie was still trying to control the narrative, still painting me as the unstable husband who had overreacted. That weekend, I drove back to Denver, not to the house Stephanie and I had shared, but to Marcus' place, an old friend from construction who had stood beside me at my wedding. When I knocked, Marcus opened the door, eyebrows raised. "Heard you and Stephanie split up," he said. "Sorry, man." I asked him what he had heard, and he shrugged. "Just that you took off after some fight." She seemed pretty torn up about it. And there it was again, her version of the story, twisted and reshaped to make me the villain. Marcus handed me a beer, and we sat together on his back porch in silence. the weight of everything pressing down on me as I realized my fight was not just about leaving her, but about reclaiming the truth of who I was and refusing to let her rewrite it. I told him the real story, every single detail I hadn't shared with many people, and when I finally finished, Marcus just shook his head and muttered, "That's messed up." His voice was heavy with disbelief, like he couldn't quite process the cruelty of it all. And then he asked me the question I've been asking myself since the night it all happened. Why would she do something like that? I didn't have a clean answer, but I told him the truth as best I understood it. I think she wanted me gone. Not forever, not in the way people talk about cutting ties of good, but in a way that gave her the power to hurt me, to show me how little I really mattered in her world, how disposable I could be if she wanted me to feel it. Marcus didn't say anything right away. He just sat there, staring out into the yard like he was remembering something. Then he turned back to me and said, "You know what I remember? About your wedding?" I shook my head, not sure where he was going. "During the reception, you were talking to some of my crew guys. Just normal conversation, laughing, having a good time. But every time you looked happy, every time you were enjoying yourself, Stephanie would come over and interrupt, find some excuse to drag you away." I didn't think much of it at the time, but now his words trailed off. A memory stirred in me. The way she tugged on my arm that night, insisting we needed to thank a relative or pose for another round of pictures, never letting me just be present with people. Back then I thought she was just being a good hostess, taking care of things, but now I wasn't so sure. Maybe, I said slowly, or maybe she just couldn't stand to see me happy without her being the reason for it. That thought sat heavy in my chest, like a puzzle piece that had been missing for years, finally snapping into place. Later that night, I drove past the house we'd lived in together, the place I once thought of as my forever home. Her car was parked in the driveway, and I could see the soft glow of the living room light spilling out to the blinds, her shadow moving from room to room like nothing had changed. I didn't stop, didn't even slow down. I just kept driving, my hands gripping the steering wheel, as if letting go might pull me back into that old life. Passing that house, though, I felt something shift deep inside me. It wasn't just about running away from a broken marriage anymore. It was about moving toward something better, toward the version of myself I had lost in the years of compromise, manipulation, and silence. Over the next few months, I took steps I should have taken long ago. I opened my own bank account, transferred my share of our savings, and hired a lawyer named Patricia Coleman, a sharp and no-nonsense woman who listened to everything without judgment, her pen scratching across a legal pad as I spoke. When I showed her the block numbers, the endless messages from Jessica and Vanessa, and the fact that Stephanie had gone to my parents' house spinning lies about me having a breakdown, she nodded firmly. "We can work with this," she said, her voice steady in a way that gave me more confidence than I'd had in weeks. I signed the divorce papers that very afternoon, and Patricia laid down her final piece of advice. Do not engage. Don't pick up calls. Don't respond to texts. Don't let her draw you back in. If she shows up, document it. Call the police if necessary. But don't give her anything she can twist against you. Those words became my shield. While the hospital renovation project kept me busy, I found myself thriving in ways I hadn't expected. I was promoted to crew leader, managing 5 guys who respected me, and in the evenings I started taking community college classes in business management, something I'd always wanted to pursue but never had the freedom for. For the first time in years, I had space to think, to breathe, to imagine a life built on my own choices instead of someone else's expectations. 2 months later, Patricia called me back to her office, her desk stacked with fresh papers and her eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. Stephanie, it seemed, had tried to twist the story again, filing claims of abandonment and even whispering lies that I had been abusive. But Patricia had dug deeper, and what she uncovered made my blood run hot and my heart oddly light at the same time. Photos of Stephanie and her sisters celebrating the night they abandoned me, laughing and drinking at a bar, captions bragging about their girls' weekend. Screenshots of group chats where they mocked me, placed bets on how fast I'd crawl back, months of cruelty laid bare in their own words. When the divorce hearing finally came, I walked into the courtroom wearing the same suit I'd worn to marry her 8 years earlier, though it felt like it belonged to a different man. Across the room, Stephanie looked thinner, worn out, her eyes darting nervously as her lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, vindictive, a man who had abandoned his wife over a harmless prank. But when Patricia rose to speak, calm and precise, she dismantled their entire narrative piece by piece, laying out the evidence until there was nothing left for Stephanie to hide behind. The judge ruled in my favor, granting the divorce, dividing assets fairly, and rejecting every claim she had made. As I left the courthouse, Stephanie tried to approach me, her face caught between desperation and anger, but Patricia stepped in firmly. No contact. And that was that. 3 years after that gas station in Montana, it was finally over. Life didn't magically become perfect, but it became mine. The business classes gave me the tools I needed, and 6 months later I started Thompson Contracting, a small company that grew slowly but surely, built on honesty and hard work. Kevin came on as my first employee. Marcus joined not long after, and before I knew it, we were building something real, something lasting. I bought a modest house in Colorado Springs, with a garage for my tools, and a yard where I could sit in the evenings and breathe in quiet. No shared compromises, no constant second-guessing, just peace. One day at the hardware store, Marcus mentioned Stephanie had remarried and divorced again within a year, her reputation unraveling, her circle of friends shrinking as the truth of who she really was caught up with her. Jessica and Vanessa hadn't fared much better, their lies and games eventually costing them jobs, trust, and connections. But by then, I didn't care. Their stories weren't mine anymore. Some lessons, I realized, can only be learned the hard way, and the hardest one of all had set me free.